Hey folks, Happy New Year. If this is the first one of my videos you've watched in 2019, I know that some of you only tend to check out the Star Trek themed stuff that I do, which is totally cool. I hope you had a good holiday, whatever holiday you happened to be celebrating, if any, over the last couple of weeks. I had a pretty good Christmas. In fact, I have two of my favorite Christmas presents that I got right here on camera with me. The first is this awesome Star Trek coffee mug that my wife got me that has the Starfleet logo there on the front, and then on the other side it has to boldly go where no man has gone before. And it's nice and heavy, like the kind of coffee mug you'd get in a restaurant. Keeps the beverage of your choice nice and hot, especially if you take forever to drink it like I sometimes do. And then the other one, also a gift from my lovely wife, is this official Star Trek Discovery t-shirt as seen on the show, where there was that one episode where Ensign, or Cadet at the time, Tilly and Burnham were going for a jog in the corridor, and they had on their disco t-shirts. And I said to my wife at the time, boy, I'd love to get one of those shirts. Those shirts look really cool. And then I forgot that I asked her for it, and lo and behold, on Christmas morning, there it was, because I definitely married the right girl. She understands that the way to my heart is through officially licensed Star Trek merchandise. And if no officially licensed merchandise will do, then bootleg shit is cool too. So I wanted to talk about Star Trek Discovery in this video. This is going to be another one of them, not actually Trek Actually videos, because I am writing the next proper Trek Actually video now. It will be up next week if you're watching these videos as I upload them. I'm scripting it. I'm getting close to the end of the script, and then I'll shoot it and edit it, and everything will be done by a week from today, a week from when this video goes up. So look forward to that. It's the holodeck video. But in between now and then, I wanted to do another one of these not actually Trek Actually videos, because next week, the big Star Trek event is not my rinky-dink little video going up, but the second season premiere of Star Trek Discovery. Discovery is coming back for another season. I'm really excited about it. I enjoyed the first year, as you know if you've watched my previous videos on the subject, and I'm really looking forward to another season of Discovery. But before we get season 2 of Discovery, for the last couple of months, we've been getting these little appetizers, these little bite-sized mini episodes of Star Trek called Short Treks. And now that all 4 Short Treks have been released, I thought I would do a video with my thoughts on the Short Treks, because they're very interesting. They're the sort of thing that Star Trek has never really done before. It's a really neat little experiment. And I think how you react to the mini episodes, how you react to the Short Treks, can be determined largely by how you approach them. To me, I view them as kind of like bonus material. I don't view them as proper sort of Discovery episodes. I don't come at them with the same expectations I would have for a full-fledged, official, quote-unquote, Star Trek Discovery episode. I view them as like bonus content, as little extras that we get, so that the wait between seasons doesn't seem quite as long. So there were 4 of them. I'll go through them one at a time in chronological order. The first of the Short Treks was featuring one of my favorite characters from season 1 of Discovery, Tilly, now Ensign Tilly, previously Cadet Tilly, now promoted to full Ensign. And it centers on Tilly, and it's called Runaway. And it's about Tilly discovering this young alien woman who has snuck aboard the Discovery and is hiding from the authorities on her home planet. And by the way, spoilers, if anybody hasn't seen any of the Short Treks and you don't want to know what happens, I'm going to be discussing plot points and stuff in them pretty freely. So spoiler warning right now, if you don't want me to spoil what happens in the Short Treks, you should maybe not watch this right now. But the girl that Tilly discovers, who has stowed away aboard the Discovery, is named Poe, and she's from a planet where they mine dilithium crystals, and also where her species originated at the same time as their planet. And Tilly kind of points out, that's a little weird, I'm not sure how that can happen, but she says, well, that's the way it happened. And because her species and her planet originated at the same time, her people regard their planet as a sibling, as their sister. They believe that they're twins, that their race and their planet are twins, which is kind of a cool idea. It doesn't really get explored all that much, but it's a neat idea. And there are a couple of neat ideas in Runaway that don't really have time to stretch out and get explored in satisfying ways. Unfortunately, since I'm such a Tilly fan and a fan of Mary Wiseman, the actor who plays Tilly, I think she's just magnificent. I think Runaway is probably the weakest of the 4 short treks. It's not bad. It's not something that I watched and I was disappointed in or wished that I hadn't watched it, but it feels very rushed. There's a lot that happens in the space of its 15-minute or so running time. There's a lot of emotional ground that needs to be covered. The relationship between Tilly and Poe travels quite a distance in that short period of time, and the episode takes place mostly in real time. There's a couple of little short jumps in time from scene to scene, but overall it takes place in a very compressed period of time for the characters as well as for we in the audience. And a lot happens in that very short time. And because of that, some of the emotional beats that happen, especially toward the end, when it feels as though Tilly and Poe have become really close and have come to regard each other as friends and admire each other and respect each other, a lot of that feels a little rushed and a little forced and maybe a little false because it's happened in such a short time. And there are a couple of other things in the episode that feel like they're put in for the sake of convenience, or they're sort of hand-waved away because the running time is so short, because I presume the budget for these episodes is fairly small, and because the only member of the main Discovery cast that appears is Mary Wiseman as Tilly. So they're very limited in terms of what they can do as far as storytelling. So there are things like it's never really explained how Poe gets aboard the ship, and when Poe leaves to return to her planet at the end, Tilly just beams her away. So I guess we could presume that the Discovery was nearby to Poe's planet, and that's how she got aboard the ship in the first place, and that's how Tilly was able to just beam her back without anybody on the ship knowing about it. But that it feels a little contrived and a little convenient, and that's never really addressed. And it's not a huge deal, but it just makes the whole episode feel a little sloppy and a little rushed. Also, the conceit of Poe being able to sneak aboard the ship and be discovered by no one other than Tilly. And they address that through dialogue. Tilly says to Poe, look, I'm supposed to report you. I'm supposed to tell people that you're aboard the ship. And then Tilly never does. She decides to just keep it between her and Poe, and eventually they settle things between them and Tilly beams her away. But that smacks of contrivance. It doesn't feel right that this person would be able to sneak aboard the ship with nobody knowing, and then Tilly would find her and nobody else would find her. There are things like that that smack of contrivance, that remind you that this is not really a full-fledged episode. I'm sure it's considered canon. I'm sure the events of the episode, quote unquote, really happened in the continuum of Discovery. But you can tell that it's not a proper episode. Nobody other than Tilly shows up. You don't see, and there's no reference to any kind of larger events other than those that are directly tied to the plot of this short. If you remember, season 2 or season 1 of Discovery ended on a cliffhanger. Season 2 presumably is going to pick right up at that point where season 1 left off. So the time at which Runaway is taking place is not really clear. It's after the events of season 1, we know, because Tilly is an ensign, no longer a cadet. But there's no reference to anything that's happening right now, so we're not sure exactly when Runaway takes place. But overall, not a bad episode, just not great. And if you look at it as a bonus feature, as something that you get in addition to the main show, it's perfectly fine. And it's always nice to see Mary Wiseman as Tilly, because I think she's wonderful. The second short trek, Calypso. Now this is something really special. This is something unlike anything I've ever seen in Star Trek, and it is far and away the best of the 4 short treks, and one of the best Star Trek stories I've seen in any medium in a very long time. Calypso is unique in that it takes place entirely aboard the Discovery, but it takes place far, far into the future. like 1,000 years into the future. The ship is somewhere in the galaxy all by itself. The crew is gone. None of that is explained. None of that is addressed. And none of that is important because Calypso takes place really on an island unto itself. The only being left on the ship that we see is the ship's computer, which through some mechanism, some process that again we aren't told and isn't really all that important, has evolved into an artificial intelligence. And this artificial intelligence in the ship collects this person on an escape pod that happens to be drifting by. And this guy is kind of a refugee from a planet. And we learn about him. And we learn about his backstory. He's from a human colony. And we're given to believe that during this era of history that the Federation doesn't really exist anymore and things aren't really going too well, at least from where this guy's from. Things aren't really going too well for humans. But he comes aboard the ship and he lives aboard the Discovery and he forms this relationship with the computer. And it's lovely. Like, it's really, really well done. The actor who plays the main human character, whose name is Kraft, that actor's name is Aldous Hodge, and he's just terrific, does a really good job playing really to nobody. He's the only character we see physically present for almost the entire episode, and he does a really good job of creating a character and creating a relationship with the Discovery's computer, which comes to be named Zora. So it's Zora the computer and Kraft who are the main characters in this. And they spend the episode just getting to know each other and bonding. And they bond over Zora teaching Kraft what she knows about human culture. They bond over food. They bond over film. They become interested in the movie Funny Face, and that becomes a metaphor for their relationship. And there's a lovely scene that they share near the end of the episode where Zora projects a holographic representation of herself onto the bridge, and Kraft and she share a dance like in a scene from Funny Face, and then ultimately Kraft realizes that he can't stay, that he wants to go back to his people, to his family, and Zora gives him the means to leave. She gives him a shuttlecraft and lets him go, and it's a really poignant, beautiful ending, and it's just lovely. It's a perfect little short science fiction film. And yeah, it's Star Trek, and yeah, it's Discovery, and it takes place entirely on the Discovery ship, which Kraft has the run of because he's the only person there. And other than that, it has no connection to anything on the main series. But it doesn't need that. It works perfectly well for what it is, and it's by far the best of the 4 short treks. So if you're going to watch any of them, if you haven't seen any of these yet, and you're thinking about checking them out, and definitely watch Calypso, because Calypso is fantastic. The third of the 4 short treks is centered on my other favorite character from season 1 of Discovery, and that is Saru, the science officer and later the first officer of the Discovery, played by Doug Jones. Just a fantastic character. One of, I think, the greatest sort of original creation of Discovery so far. Just a fantastic character. And the Brightest Star tells us a little bit about his origin. It features Saru at an earlier point in his life on his home planet before he joins Starfleet, and we learn that his people, the Kelpians, are basically raised as livestock by this other race that comes every once in a while to collect them, and they sort of have built their religious and cultural life around this ritual of some of them being selected to be sacrificed. And they're all cool with it. They're all very docile and very, accepting of it and view it as a positive thing. But Saru is different. Saru realizes that he doesn't want this. This isn't the life that is for him. He wants something else. And one day he finds this piece of technology that is not from their planet, that is from somewhere else. And because he's so clever and smart, he's able to fix it and modify it. And it's a communicator. And he's able to send a message out to the stars that is answered, and it's answered by someone from Starfleet. And it just so happens the person who answers it is Philippa Georgiou, who comes down to the planet. Saru meets her outside of his village, so none of his other people know about it. And she says, hey, we got your message, and if you want to come with me, I will take you with me. I don't think you'll ever be able to come back here because we have complicated rules about interacting with other cultures, especially cultures like yours that aren't traveling in space and all of that. But if you want to come with me, I'll bring you with me. And he says, yes, take me with you. And that's how Saru's adventure in Starfleet begins. And this one is cool for a couple of reasons. There are little things in here that I really like. First of all, we meet Saru's sister, Sarana, and she's played by an actor named Hannah Spear. And if you've never heard of Hannah Spear, she's this awesome actor who I've seen her in a couple of like internet series, like web series. She was in Sexy Nerd Girl on YouTube, and she also was in sort of the spin-off series of that called Versus Valerie. Was really, really good in that, really funny and charming and just everything. And she's also done some other sort of online comedy series and guest appearances and things like that. And she does, I believe she's from Toronto, and she's active in the comedy improv scene in Toronto. And she hasn't done a whole lot of high profile stuff. So it was awesome to see her show up in this Star Trek short. And I didn't even recognize her because she was in Kelpie and makeup, but I saw her name in the credits and I was like, holy shit. And it was just really, really cool to see her because I'm familiar with her work and I've been a fan of hers for a few years now. And it's just awesome to see her show up in Star Trek. Like, how cool is that? So congratulations, Hannah Spear. We don't know each other. You'll probably never see this, but congratulations on getting a part in a Star Trek show. That's awesome. And getting to be Saru's sister. That's very, very cool. Also, Saru's final line in the episode, the Kelpians, their whole culture, unfortunately, is sort of oriented around fear and around their imminent deaths. And that's something that we got from Saru in season 1, where he says, my species has evolved to sense the approach of death. So they're a very fearful people, just naturally, instinctively. But when Saru is leaving, when he's joining Giorgio to leave the planet and to go to the stars, to go join Starfleet, he says through his voiceover, because Saru has been narrating for us for the duration of the show, he says, I saw hope in the stars and it was stronger than fear, and I went towards it. And if that is not one of the most eloquent summations of the philosophy behind Star Trek that I've ever heard, I don't know what is. It's not as good as Calypso. It feels, what it is its backstory. I think the main problem I had with it is its backstory that for the most part we didn't really need. And again, if you look at it as bonus material, if you look at it as something that you get in addition to the main product, then it's fine. I have no serious complaints about it. It is what it is. And it's nice. It's always nice to see Saru. It was cool to see Hannah Spear. It was cool to see Michelle Yeoh coming back as Giorgio at the end. A nice little bit of fan service. Although it does have the sort of, what a small galaxy effect that happens in Star Trek a lot, where, so Saru didn't just end up serving on a ship with Giorgio and they bonded over, their service together. Giorgio was the one who found him and brought him to Starfleet. Okay, small galaxy. That happens a lot, and sometimes that's a little annoying, but it is what it is. It's a convenience. It's something that is nothing new to Star Trek. It's happened many, many times in the past, and it just is what it is. And then we have the last of the short treks, which is The Escape Artist, which was released on January 3rd, just a week ago, if you're watching this as it's uploaded. And this one centers on Harry Mudd, who is played in Discovery by Rainn Wilson, and this episode was also directed by Rainn Wilson, and Rainn Wilson does a fine job as a director. He would probably be a decent Star Trek director if he wanted to direct more episodes of Star Trek TV shows. He does just fine here as a director in The Escape Artist, and he does just fine as Harry Mudd. I like Rainn Wilson's Harry Mudd. I think I've acclimated myself to him. He is definitely different from the original series version of Harry. He definitely has a much more sinister side, a much darker side to him than the original version that we see in the original series. Maybe he lightens up, since this Mudd is a few years before we meet him in the original series. Maybe from then to now, he lightens up and becomes a little bit more of a comical character. if you feel like you absolutely have to stitch the two together, which I'm not as worried about as some folks are. But he's still funny. That's the thing. Is that this, of the 4 short treks, this is definitely the funniest one. It lives and dies, it rises and falls on the chemistry that Rainn Wilson has with his various interlocutors throughout the episode, as Mudd finds himself imprisoned in a ship, and also he flashes back, or what we think he's flashing back, it turns out to be something a little different, but to other times when he's been imprisoned, and we see him bantering with his various captors, and most of that is funny, or at least it's funny enough, and it's just entertaining to see Harry Mudd be Harry Mudd, and that's really the draw of this short trek. Is, do you like Harry Mudd? Well, here's 15 minutes of Harry Mudd being Harry Mudd. And again, as I've said a couple times, for the short treks other than Calypso, this is fine. You know, it's nothing that is outstanding. It's nothing that I think is going to win any awards or have anybody talking about it for years and years and years. It's fine. It's funny, it's clever, it's enjoyable, it's entertaining, it is what it is. It's a nice appetizer before we get to the main course of what will hopefully be a pretty good second season of Star Trek Discovery. The one thing I did enjoy particularly about The Escape Artist, and why I think this is probably my second favorite of the short treks. It's number 2 behind Calypso. Nothing is going to catch Calypso. The Escape Artist is second place because this one actually has a trick to it. This one actually goes somewhere a little bit unexpected. The narrative lines of the other 3 are fairly straightforward. They're fairly predictable, and that's not necessarily a problem. Not every story has to throw you a loop at the end. Not every story has to have a shocking twist. That's not necessary. But Runaway pretty much goes the way you expect it to. She comes aboard the ship. She's a stowaway till he finds her. Eventually, she goes home. You know, Calypso Craft comes to the Discovery. He bonds with the computer. They have a sort of bittersweet quasi-romance, but ultimately he realizes he has to go, and he leaves. And that's not a huge surprise. In fact, it's all the more satisfying because we feel like that's the only way it can end. That's the right ending. The Brightest Star, we know Saru is going to leave his planet. We know Saru isn't going to be sacrificed. We know Saru isn't going to be eaten or killed or whatever. With The Escape Artist, there's a little twist at the end, which I appreciated. It turns out, and again, spoilers, if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled, last warning, it turns out that we haven't been following Harry Mudd for this episode. We've actually been following an android who just looks and is programmed to act like Harry Mudd. It's revealed at the end that the real Harry Mudd is the person who is selling all of these copies of himself, all of these Mudd androids. And it's a neat little callback, or maybe because this is a prequel, a call forward to the original series episode where Harry Mudd finds himself on a planet filled with androids. So here we have Mudd 10 years earlier or so messing around with android replicants of himself. So it kind of ties together, and it's a fun little sort of, see, Mudd and androids, right? You know, remember? Kind of, I guess you'd call it fan service, or again, like a callback or a call forward, a reference to something else in Mudd's character that we will recognize if we're Star Trek fans. And it's appreciated, and it's neat, and it's a cool twist on the episode, because it turns out we haven't, when we've seen flashes of Mudd with different captors, it's not Harry flashing back and remembering other times when he's been held prisoner. We're actually seeing the experiences of different Mudd androids that have been captured by different people. And it's you know, it's not like a shocking Twilight Zone Shyamalan style twist where you're like, oh my God, he was an android the whole time. It's just a clever twist. And I appreciate it, because it makes the episode feel like it goes somewhere. It makes the episode feel like it has a sense of completion. And I like that, and it helps, because other than that, and the humor, the fact that the stuff with Rainn Wilson just being Harry Mudd is clever and funny, and the timing is good, and the writing is funny enough. Not a whole lot to this one. Not a whole lot in terms of story, or in terms of like artistic content. Not a whole lot there. But it's funny, which is what it's supposed to be. It's clever. It has a neat twist at the end. And overall, I think it's the second best of the 4 short treks episodes or mini episodes. So there you go. I think Calypso is the best one, and it's one of the best Star Trek things I've seen in a long time. I think The Escape Artist would be number 2. Number 3 probably would be The Brightest Star, because I'm a total mark for Saru. And then last place would be the first one, Runaway, which as much as I love Mary Wiseman, as much as I love Tilly, it just didn't quite measure up to the other 3 that came after it. But nothing wrong with any of them. It was perfectly fine bonus content for Star Trek Discovery. And it did succeed in making me want to see the main show come back even more, which is something that I think was part of the plan. Give you a little bit of Star Trek stuff leading up to the premiere of the main show, which is coming up next week. Cleverly scheduled to come out on January 17th or 0117 or 1701. I didn't realize that until last week, and I felt like the biggest numbskull in the galaxy. I was like, oh, 1701. No shit. But anyway, so looking forward to season 2 of Discovery. When the season is maybe halfway through, I'll probably come back and do another one of these with my thoughts about how the season has gone so far, just like I did with season 1. And then when season 2 is all the way finished, I'll do another sort of recap review video on the entire season, so you can know what I think of it as a full season. So that's coming up in the future weeks and months. Don't forget to check out the next proper Trek Actually video, which is coming out next week. That will be the holodeck episode. Is the holodeck actually more trouble than it's worth? And if you dig the Trek Actually videos and you are a patron of mine on Patreon, or you're thinking about becoming a patron of mine on Patreon, don't forget that you can vote for the topic of future Trek Actually videos on my Patreon page. The poll for the February episode of Trek Actually is still up. You can go and vote for it right now if you haven't voted already. All you have to do is be a patron at a $1 level per month or more, and you can vote in the poll for the next, for the February episode of Trek Actually. So go check that out. Check out patreon.com/Steve Shives if you dig these videos I do and you want to help me keep making them. Don't forget, I also am the co-star of the Ensign's Log, a Star Trek themed comedy podcast. You can subscribe to it through the podcast app of your choice, or listen to it on SoundCloud. The link is in the description of this video. If you dig the funny Star Trek stuff, if you like Trek Actually videos, and you haven't listened to the Ensign's Log, I think you'll really, really like it. So check it out if you haven't listened to it yet. And yeah, I'll see you next week for the next proper episode of Trek Actually. We'll talk a little bit about the holodeck. Until then, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.